Chapter 9, the Circulatory System. The circulatory system diagram. The circulatory chapter codes include those from both the cardiovascular and lymphatic systems. Note the use of color to signify the vessels of the circulatory system: red for arteries, blue for veins, and green for lymphatic vessels. The circulatory composition and functions. The circulatory system is named for its continued movement of blood and lymph through the body. It is composed of the cardiovascular structures, the heart, arteries, and veins, as well as lymphatic structures, such as the lymph organs, the lymph nodes, and lymph vessels. The function of the cardiovascular system is to provide a means of transportation for a variety of substances to and from the cells of the body. The lymphatic system performs a cleansing function and is intimately connected with the cardiovascular system to carry out its functions. The substances that need to be delivered are oxygen, nutrients, water, body salts, and hormones. The primary waste product that needs to be removed from the body is carbon dioxide. The arteries, veins, and lymphatic structures are often named for the anatomical body part that they serve. An example is brachial arteries are in the arm. Brachio equals arm in your word parts. Directional terminology: the superior vena cava returns blood from the upper body. Super O is upward. Your oxygenated vessels, usually arteries, are colored red. Deoxygenated vessels, usually veins, are colored blue. And the lymphatic vessels and nodes are colored green. As we move through the circulatory anatomy, we will be collecting and using several word parts. These will be displayed in the column to your left. Use the diagram and the combining forms provided to explain the differences among arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries are thick and muscular, necessary properties to withstand the force of the heartbeat, while veins are thinner and have one-way valves. They prevent the backflow of blood. Your capillaries are tiny and thin enough to allow only one blood cell at a time to pass through them. Tiny arteries, also known as arterioles, connect the arteries to the capillaries, and tiny veins, which are the venules, connect the capillaries to the veins. And over on your left, as we said, are the word parts. So with this, you got cardio, corono, or cardio is heart. Angio, vaso, or vasculo is vessel. Arterio is artery. And veno or plebo would be vein. The PCS guideline alert. This guideline refers to the cardiovascular system's arteries and veins, not the lymphatic vessels. The body systems, designated as either upper or lower, contain body parts located above or below the diaphragm, respectively. A special note that any vessel that an individual is born with is termed as native vessel, as opposed to those that may be acquired from another individual, an animal, or made from synthetic fibers. Note that the word native is derived from nato, which equals birth, and av, meaning pertaining to those vessels that come with one's birth. Circulation of the blood, pulmonary. Notice that the circulation can be divided into three main areas: pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation, and coronary circulation, and that is through the heart itself. Pulmonary circulation begins with the right side of the heart. Notice that the blood is deoxygenated, and where the blood is pushed out to the lungs to offload the carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen. Now oxygenated, the blood travels back to the left side of the heart, where it is pumped out to begin its route through the systemic circulation. Note that the pulmonary circulation is about the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide with the cells of the lungs. Your word parts is pulmo equals lung, oxy or oxo is oxygen, and cantno is carbon dioxide. The systemic circulation describes the exchange of gases as substances between the blood and the cells of the body. The blood is pumped out of the left side of the heart through the aorta, the largest artery of the body, to a system of arteries that divide into smaller arterioles that end in tiny capillaries. The capillaries of the body tissues are the sites of exchange between the cells, fluids, and the plasma of the circulatory system. Their journey then begins back to the heart through tiny veins called venules, then larger veins, and finally the two largest veins of the body, the inferior and superior vena cava. Renal circulation is the part of the systemic circulation where the blood passes through the kidneys. The hepatic portal circulation is the part of systemic circulation where the blood flows through the small intestines, collects in the portal vein, then the liver. The purpose is to have the liver filter sugars from the blood and store them as needed. And the word parts over on your left: aorta, arterioles, cyto or cellulo is cell, reno is kidney, and hepato would be liver. The muscular thick arteries, also known as vessels, are composed of three tunics or coats. The outer layer is called the tunica externa adventitia. The muscle layer and elastic layer are called the tunica media, and the inner layer is called the tunica interna, the intima. Now your word parts on the left is vasculo, angio or vaso equals vessel, tunica equals coat, externa equals outside, media equals middle, and interna is inside. The heart and the great vessels. The human heart is about the size of a fist. It is located in the mediastinum of the thoracic cavity, slightly left of the midline. Its pointed tip, the apex, rests just above the diaphragm. The area of the chest wall, anterior to the heart and lower thorax, is referred to as the precordium because of its location in front of the heart. Inside the heart has four chambers. The upper chambers are called the atria. And with your atria, you've got your right atrium, the RA, and the left atrium, the LA. The lower chambers are called the ventricles, which are composed of fleshy, beam-shaped structures called trabecular carne. Between the atria and the ventricles, and between the ventricles and the vessels, are valves that allow blood to flow through in one direction. The tissue wall between the top and the bottom chambers is called the atrioventricular septum. And your word parts: apico is apex, pre in front of, cardio is heart, is structure, atrio is atrium, ventriculo is ventricle, and septo equals septum. And here's a diagram of the heart and the great vessels. Note the various great vessels. They show how the pulmonary trunk divides and splits to the right and left pulmonary arteries. We note that the trunk is a main vessel with vessels that split off of it. In PCS, the inferior vena cava is classified as a lower vein. Over on your left are your word parts. Pulmonal is lung and aorta is aorta. The heart wall is constructed of three distinct layers: the endocardium is composed of endothelial cells and connective tissue that acts as the lining for each of the chambers and valves. The myocardium is the cardiac muscle surrounding each of these chambers. The pericardium is the double-folded layer of connective tissue that surrounds the heart. The pericardial cavity holds a serous fluid that protects the heart from friction. The inner layer of this double fold is called the visceral pericardium, and the outer membrane closest to the body wall is the parietal pericardium. Another name for the visceral pericardium is the epicardium, because it is the structure on top of the heart. The term transmural is used to describe a heart disorder that is through the wall of the heart. An example would be a transmural infarct, which is tissue death, an infarct that extends through the entire thickness of the heart wall from the endocardium to the epicardium. And your word parts: endocardio equals endocardium, myocardio is myocardium, pericardio is pericardium, viscero is viscera or organs, parietal equals wall, trans equals through, and mural equals wall. The heart surface. The term sulcus is a general term that is applied to the groove in the heart of the coronary artery. Of the heart surface, on the left heart, you've got your left coronary sulcus and the obtuse margin. On the right heart surface, you got the right coronary sulcus. And then you got your walls, which is the anterior wall, inferior wall, and lateral wall. The word parts: anterior is anterior, which equals front, inferior equals below or inferior, and lateral is lateral or side. Structures of the atria. This slide gives more detail for the arteries. Note that the left and the right auricular appendages, which are small ear-like pouches on top of each atrium. The right auricular appendage is in the area that can give rise to tachycardia, while the left auricular appendage is the structure responsible for a large number of blood clots during atrial fibrillation. The sinus venosus is an embryonic structure that holds blood as it returns to the heart. Later, it becomes part of the right atrium, while on the left, it becomes the coronary sinus and the oblique vein of the left side of the heart. The word parts: atrio is atrium, and auriculo is ear. Structures of the ventricles. The lower vessels, the ventricles, are composed of fleshy beam-shaped structures termed the trabeculae carnae. The chordae tendineae, literally heartstrings, are the cord-like tendons attached to the valves by the papillary muscles. The cornus arteriosus is the conical projection of the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk. In some references, it is referred to as the infundulum, which means funnel-shaped. Your word parts: ventriculo is ventricle, chordo is cord, and cono equals cone. The blood flow through the heart. The valves. Each valve has a fibrous ring at its base called annulus. The bicuspid valve has two leaflets that are attached to two nipple-like papillary muscles by the chordae tendineae, which is a cord-like tendon. The papillary muscles open and close the heart valve. The tricuspid valve has three leaflets attached to the three papillary muscles, connected again by the chordae tendineae. And with the word parts and the abbreviations: pulmo equals lung, tricuspid valve is TV, pulmonary arteries is abbreviated as PA, pulmonary veins PV, right atrium RA, The mitral or bicuspid valve is MV. Left atrium, LA. Right ventricle is RV. Left ventricle is LV. The annulus equals ring. The heart muscle has its own dedicated system of blood supply, the coronary arteries. The two main coronary arteries are called the left and right coronary arteries. The right coronary artery branches to form the posterior or interventricular descending artery, which divides to form the atrioventricular artery, and finally the posterior septal artery. The other main branch of the RCA, which is the right coronary artery, is the marginal artery, and which divides to form the acute marginal artery. And the word part for this will be corono, which equals heart. A review question. The upper chambers of the heart are the A. Arterioles, B. The atria, C. The venules, or D. The ventriculus. The answer would be B. The atria. Did you know a good way to remember how the blood flows through the heart valves is to memorize the phrase, try before you buy? In the heart, blood through the tricuspid valve, and then through the bicuspid, which is the mitral valve. The amount of blood expelled from the left ventricle compared with the total volume of blood filling the ventricle is referred to as the stroke volume and is a measure of the ejection refraction of cardiac output. Think of this as a measure of the strength and efficiency of the heart muscle. The normal reading is around 65% for the ejection fraction, and any percent under that may indicate disease. The measure of the heart rate is calculated in beats per minute, while normal range is from 60 to 100 beats per minute. The areas of measurement around the body are the pulse points. And take a look at the pulse points on the diagram to your left. You got the temporal artery, the facial artery, the common carotid artery, the brachial artery, the radial artery, the femoral artery, popliteal artery, which is behind the knee, posterior tibial artery, and the dorsal pedis. Conductive mechanism system. The cardiovascular system is dependent on the coordinated contractions and relaxations of the heart muscle. When this force, the blood pressure, is measured by an instrument termed a sphygmomanometer, a blood pressure cuff. The reading is measured as systole, the contractive phase, over diastole, the relaxation phase. Normal blood pressure is in a range from 120 to 139 over 80 to 84. The timing of the contractions and relaxation is accomplished through the electrical pathways in the heart. The heartbeat begins at the sinoatrial node, the natural pacemaker of the heart. This initial signal causes the atria to contract. This signal is then sent to the atrioventricular node, located at the base of the right atrium, proximal to the intratrial septum. From the ventricular node, the signal travels to the bundle of His, also called the atrioventricular bundle, in the interatrial septum. Its right and left bundle branches transmit the impulse of the Purkinje fibers in the right and left ventricles. Once the Purkinje fibers receive stimulation, they cause the ventricles to contract and force the blood out to the pulmonary arteries and the aorta. Normal electrical activity is referred to as the normal sinus rhythm. An abnormality of the signals may result in an arrhythmia, which is abnormal heartbeat. ECGs and EKG recording of the cardiac cycle. you will see the ECGs and EKGs spelled in these different ways, but just note that they are the same exact thing. When we note that the ST elevation myocardial infarctions, STEMIs, are coded differently than the non-ST elevation myocardial infarctions and STEMIs. This slide shows the difference between how the I-10 manual or coding books divide the arteries into upper, which are those above the diaphragm, and the lower, which are below the diaphragm. The arteries naming and division. Upper and lower divisions are based on relation to the diaphragm, many named by the anatomical structure that they supply. The subdivisions may include information about the direction or position, ascending or descending, anterior or posterior, superior or inferior. The concept of branches becomes important for the circulatory as well as the nervous system chapters. First, second, and third order branches are described best by thinking of a tree and its branches. A first order branch is the one that first leaves the heart, the innominate or the brachiocephalic artery. A second order branch is the one that leaves the first order one, the right subclavian artery. And as you might suspect, that the third order branch would be the one that divides off of the right subclavian, the axillary artery. This continues until the arteries reach their farthest point and their blood begins its return through the venous vessels. With your PCS guideline alert in the medial and surgical section of the coding book, section O, it says body systems designated as upper or lower contain body parts located above or below the diaphragm, respectively. With the nerves and vessels that are not identified by a separate body part value are coded to the closest proximal branch identified by the body part value. First, we'll take a look at the upper arteries. We will not be able to show every single artery, but we will cover the ones that the I-10 book lists in the categories that are coded to. The upper arteries. The facial artery is also called the external maxillary artery. With your head and neck, you got the right common carotid, which is the internal and external carotid. You got the cerebral, which is from external, and your temporal is linguinal, facial, or occipital. Your right subclavian is the right vertebral, which is basilar and a circle of Willis. With this, you've got your word parts. Cerebro is cerebrum, temporo is temple, lingo is tongue, facio is face, and occipito is occipit. The chest area is supplied with blood from thoracic aorta, which divides to the right and left internal mammary arteries, then the right and the left subclavian arteries. When you use the word parts to identify the area supplied, note that the last structure, the upper part of the diaphragm, the superior phrenic, because of its use as the dividing line between upper and lower arteries. The inferior phrenic is the lower artery. Then you got your word parts. Clavi is clavicle, costo is rib, bronchio is bronchi, pericardio is pericardium, esophago is esophagus, mediastinum or mediastino is mediastinum, and freno is diaphragm. The arteries to the arms. You've got your brachial arteries, the ulnar arteries, radial arteries, and hand arteries. Again, word parts can help. We note that the brachial arteries branch from the axillary arteries. We got brachio is arm, ulno is ulna, and radio is the radius. And here's a picture of the lower arteries. The lower arteries consist of having the abdomen, the pelvis, and the legs. Begin at the abdominal aorta. You got the celiac artery. You got the gastric, which is the hepatic and the splenic. Then you got the superior and mesenteric, which is also known as the colic arteries. The renal, the inferior mesenteric, the suprarenal, and the common iliac, which contains the right and left internal and external iliac arteries. Your word parts: celio is abdomen, gastro is stomach, hepato equals liver, spleno equals spleen, mesentero is midgut, colon is colon or large intestine, reno is kidney, and supra is above. So continue from the last slide, the right and left femoral arteries branch from the external iliacs. Each then branches to the popliteal artery in each leg, then to the anterior posterior tibial arteries, then to the peroneal artery. The dorsalis pedis branches from the popliteal, then branches into the arteries of the foot. Your word parts: femoro is thigh bone, peron, O is tibia, and pedo equals foot. Just a quick note that the deep veins are those that are far from the surface, while superficial veins are close to the surface. Note again that the dividing line for upper and lower vessels is the diaphragm. The upper veins begin their drainage from the face and skull, then through the neck, the vertebral, and internal and external jugulars. The vertebral and external jugulars drain into the subclavian veins, while the internal jugular joins the subclavian to form the brachiocephalic vein. From there, the vein drains into the superior vena cava. The I-10 manual refers to the brachiocephalic vein as the innominate vein. The azygos vein drains blood from the organs and tissues of the thoracic cavity on the right. The hemozygos and the accessory hemozygos vein drains blood from the organs and tissues of the thoracic cavity on the left. The intercostal vein drains blood from the area of the ribs, the bronchial veins from the bronchi, and the pericardial vein from the sac surrounding the heart. All drain back into the superior vena cava and through the brachiocephalic vein to the superior vena cava. And then you got your word parts. Azygo is without a yolk. Inter is between. Costo is rib. Bronchio is bronchus. And pericardio is pericardium. The upper veins. The veins of the arms and hands are got in the hands and fingers. You've got the palmar and the volar digital and metacarpal veins. In the lower arms, allows for deep drainage, is the radial and ulnar, which sits anastomose at the brachial vein. The superficial drainage is the median antebrachial vein and the median cubical vein, and it connects to the basilic or cephalic veins. And then your upper arms, the brachial and the cephalic, and they drain into the axillary vein. The word parts: ante equals before, brachio equals arm, cubito is elbow, and cephalo is head. And here's a slide of the lower veins. The lower veins are those below the diaphragm. Okay, the lower veins of the legs. You've got your digital and metatarsal, greater and lesser sophrenos, the peroneal, the posterior tibial, popliteal vein, femoral, and the external iliac. And your word parts: metatars, O is metatarsal, Polliteo is behind the knee. Peroneal O is fibula, and femora equals thigh. The abdominal pelvic cavity, you've got the hepatic portal system, which contains the hepatic, gastric, splenic, pancreatic, inferior and superior mesenteric, and the esophageal. Then you've got the adrenal and renal, inferior phrenic, and internal iliac. And then you got the word parts. Hepato equals liver, gastro equals stomach, spleno equals spleen, pancreato is pancreas, mesentero is midgut, esophageo is esophagus, adreno is adrenal gland, reno is kidney, and freno equals diaphragm. Be careful when in regards to the upper veins. The cephalic veins are in the arms and not in the head. Don't confuse the basilic vein in the arms with the basilar artery in the head. Your ICD-10 PCS, circulatory system. So when coding using the PCS, coders need to recognize that the anatomical terms we have just completed and be able to categorize them into the following: heart and great vessels, upper or lower arteries, and upper and lower veins. Note in the ICD-10 PCS, the superior vena cava is classified as a great vessel of the heart, even though it is usually described as one of the two largest veins of the body. The inferior vena cava is classified as a lower vein. The slide is on fetal circulation. Note that the closure of the foramen ovale, foramen means opening, as the ductus veneris, as part of the normal transition to the neonate's own lungs.